this is Pam. Today we're going to be talking about possible potassium deficiencies and multiple sclerosis. The relevance of this is that although a potassium deficiency is not going to cause multiple sclerosis, if you do have a deficiency in this mineral or electrolyte, then you could have stronger symptoms of, let's say, spasms and tremors and fatigue and constipation and so many symptoms that we deal with multiple sclerosis. Through all of our research, we're really understanding that like all the factors that are affecting our symptoms. And so this can really help us to feel better, to manage our symptoms while we are recovering from multiple sclerosis. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha, and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis over 35 years ago. By the grace of God and a lot of diligence and research on my part, I learned early on that what I was dealing with was an infection, was a parasitic infestation. I was just 28 years old. I had been healthy all my life. I did have little warning signs. I didn't know what they meant. Had I known, had my doctor known, we could have nipped it in the bud early on and I would have never ended up being diagnosed with MS. But long story short, I lost all vision in my left eye. It was like a complete blackout for 6 weeks. Started getting tingling in my legs, fatigue, weakness in my legs. And very early on after my diagnosis, I started on this different path, which I'm so grateful. This was in the 1980s, and it was really hard to access information back then. Didn't have a computer in my home, so didn't have the internet. I would go down to the library and look up things. We did have this little health food store, and they would bring in this magazine. It's called the Alive magazine, and at the back of that magazine, there would always be a book review every month. And so that's where I started to learn from medical doctors that 40 years ago, they knew that chronic disease, including multiple sclerosis, was all caused by different types of infections, parasites. And so we started, years ago learning about candida and mold. And then we started learning about the vector-borne infections that cause Lyme disease. We get them from different biting insects, not just ticks. Then we learned about all of these different types of worms that are involved with multiple sclerosis. So I should say the reason I'm learning all of this is because we've been serving hundreds of people all over the world, helping them to recover from not just multiple sclerosis, but other diseases. All diseases are infectious diseases. Multiple sclerosis is an infectious disease. There's always critters involved whenever we have, whether it's cancer or autoimmune disease, all of these diseases. So it's just that the worse the disease, the sicker we are, the more infested we are with these parasites. So again, by learning all of this, and we continue to research, and I really believe from the bottom of my heart that it is by the grace of God that we are doing this work, that we know what we know. We don't know everything, but my goodness, it's so absolutely exciting what we have learned, how this has really saved people's lives, given them their life back. So today I'm going to talk about something that is really important because it could be a simple little thing that you might not be aware of, something you can check into, and it can really help to settle down some of the symptoms you're dealing with. Obviously, we want to treat the parasites, but if we can correct nutritional deficiencies or electrolyte deficiencies, then we can actually start to improve a lot of symptoms. But again, we do want to deal with these parasites because they're freeloaders. They directly and indirectly cause nutritional deficiencies. So although the topic was potassium, please keep in mind that these different infections are associated. We'll talk about that. They produce a lot of acids. We talked about how MS is an infectious disease. Go to our website, livediseasefree.com after. You can look at our blog. There's different articles that I've written. Really helps you to understand like the types of parasites that are involved. And we know that these parasites, their favorite source of energy would be carbohydrates and simple sugars. And so then they produce a ton of acids, and our body will use different minerals, positively charged elements, to neutralize the acids. And so then we can become deficient in different electrolytes and different minerals. And our body needs these electrolytes and minerals to function properly. And that's, especially with potassium, it has to do with a lot to do with the nerves and our muscles. So it's not just like spasticity and weakness in our leg, but it can also affect heart rhythm, right? And so really important that we understand that the cause of disease is either nutritional deficiencies, toxicity, or these parasites. And honestly, the parasites produce a lot of toxins in our body. That's usually the biggest source of toxins, and they cause nutritional deficiencies. So the parasites are really the biggest culprits in disease, in my humble opinion. So again, I'm not saying that potassium deficiency is the cause of MS. I'm saying that this could be an issue that we're dealing with when we have the parasitic infections that cause multiple sclerosis, but also other chronic diseases. And we know that potassium regulates the heartbeat. It's vital for proper function of our muscles and our nerves. It's also vital for making protein and how we break down carbohydrates. And so many symptoms that would be due to a potassium deficiency will also be due, we'll also notice them when we have multiple sclerosis. So again, go to our website, livediseasefree.com, if you want to learn more about all these different topics that I'm going to touch on. But basically, MS is an infectious disease caused by parasites. There's tons of research that show that. Then also, with multiple sclerosis, we have to understand we're dealing with dysbiosis, meaning that we're out of balance. We have too many disease-causing microbes and not enough health-promoting microbes. And that is why we are so sick. And that's why we're never going to find a single magic cure. So we're dealing with worms and protists, fungi, and bacteria. We're dealing with all kinds of different microbes. So it takes strategy to definitely make sure that we are treating the different types of parasites, because there is not one single like drug or herb that's going to treat all the different types of parasites that we're dealing with. But as I mentioned, that these parasites, they love carbohydrates, they ferment carbohydrates, they produce acidosis. We've talked a lot about that. I've done an article on that you'll find that again on livediseasefree.com about lactic acid. This is all in MS research. And so there's probably different types of parasites, right, that will cause a buildup of lactic acid. We talked about that, but I'm just going to talk about malaria here. And when I talk about malaria, I'm not saying that all MS is caused by malaria, but there is a protist. And I've done a 6-part series, and Babesia and malaria are very similar protists that infect our red blood cells. And we talked about how MS appears to be more of a vascular disease than an autoimmune disease. There's all this science behind it, and you wonder why they're not interested in looking at the science. But super important to go through that when you have time, because it really helps you to understand why you are sick, what you are dealing with. It's not just your immune system attacking your nerves for no reason. So with low potassium, they actually have a scientific name for it. I'll try to keep most of this talk fairly simple, but it's hypokalemia. And so this is when you have lower than normal potassium in your blood. But it's really important to understand that it's not just potassium that we can become deficient in because of these parasites. But this electrolyte mineral potassium, it is involved with muscle function especially. So when we're deficient in it, we could notice things like muscle twitches, muscle weakness and cramping, also tremors, paralysis of muscles, abnormal heartbeat rhythm. So make sure to let me know if you have any of these symptoms. Again, not only caused by a potassium, but also we'll talk about the other electrolytes and minerals. So I said constipation, fatigue, tingling, and numbness. And then in a chronic case of this potassium deficiencies, then they notice that there can be a rapid breakdown of muscle tissue. And that has a special name for itself, a medical name, which we're not going to worry about. But basically, it can cause a breakdown of muscle tissue, which is awful. And this is really common in malaria and babesia, so both of them. So they found this especially when they were studying animals, dogs, for example, that had babesia. So not just potassium can become deficient when we have these parasitic infestations. There are several other minerals and electrolytes. And so it's really important to understand the state of our body, because it's not as simple as just killing off parasites. We definitely want to be supporting our body so that it can function properly also. So for example, sodium also, for example, just in malaria patients, concentrations of sodium, potassium, calcium can also be lower than normal in the blood. And then with respect to magnesium, that varies. It depends on the type of parasite. And of course, when I'm saying this, remember that our food is quite deficient in certain minerals. And so we use a holistic approach. We're really trying to buy local produce whenever you can. If you can grow a small garden, I know when we're sick we can't, but as soon as you start feeling better, even visiting the local farms, getting produce that is grown on the vine. So just optimizing it in our diet. We'll talk about solutions at the end, but please be aware that, so like for example, with our students that are going through the Live Disease-Free plan, they're not just going to take potassium, they're going to take all kinds of different electrolytes and minerals, because when we're in a state of acidosis, it could definitely be any of those minerals. And so before we were, recommending, make sure you take some calcium because our food is quite deficient in calcium, and magnesium. We're taking that for supplement, but also to help the bowels move. But we didn't think about potassium until one of our students said, man, the potassium helped me a lot with my muscle spasms. And so then I did some research and finding that, this condition is common with MS and with other diseases and with the severity of diseases. But again, it's not just one mineral. And so, of course, the malaria and babesia would be passed through mainly, I believe, through mosquitoes. So potassium, calcium, sodium, and magnesium, those are all that you would consider. But to be smart, again, I would recommend just a really good whole food mineral blend. But if you are really low in potassium, you might want to take a little bit higher. It's also really important to salt your food using Himalayan or Celtic sea salt. What I found really interesting is, as I was researching, there was a person that reported that they were possibly going to have an MS diagnosis. They were having seizures also. And when she would go into the hospital for seizures, they would put her on a potassium drip, and that really settled down the seizures. So then I looked it up, and sure enough, that there is this benefit of giving potassium to people that have seizures. And of course, those would be parasites in your brain. And malaria can cause seizures, but so can tapeworm, etc. So there's probably more than one type of parasite that can cause a seizure. But so it's sometimes directly the parasite themselves that will cause symptoms, but sometimes it's the deficiency that they cause will create some of the symptoms that we're dealing with, which can be really awful. And then, as I mentioned, that in the dogs, that when they researched babesia, that they found also that they had these electrolyte imbalances. So it's not just malaria, but it's babesia and probably other different types of parasites also. So let's talk about solutions. Number one, our diet, right? We want a diet that is high, that is kind of more of an alkaline diet. So we do eat animal protein, which is a little bit more acidic, but it doesn't make us acidic. It gives us complete protein, and it decreases the food to the parasites. They don't love protein. Their favorite food, again, is carbohydrates and simple sugars. So when we decrease the carbs enough, following the Live Disease-Free diet, you can find all of our guidelines on our website, livediseasefree.com. Under research in the main menu, you'll see the guidelines for the diet. So when you get your carbs low enough, it's really shocking how much better you feel. So as you decrease the carbs, the parasites are less active, they're producing less acids, and then our body's able to start using minerals that we're getting in from our diet. Also, salt your food. When you're eating, and again, everything I'm sharing is for educational purposes. I don't know you, I don't know what medications you're on, but for a general sense, make sure that you're, especially when you're on a low carb diet, that you're having enough Celtic or Himalayan sea salt with your meals. If you're doing enemas, like sometimes we're using oxygen enemas, oxidizing agent enemas, and if you're using those, make sure that you are replenishing your electrolytes also. Blood work, you can get your blood work done and you can see where your sodium, your calcium, your potassium levels are. But I don't know how incredibly accurate they are. All I know is my GP years ago said, Pam, you can be at the bottom, low normal or high normal, and you could be bedridden. Like the range of normal is too broad, he said. So this is where we can look at our blood work, but we should also, consider maybe trying a little bit of supplement. From what I heard, like any of these supplements, just make sure you take them with food. So don't take a bunch of potassium on an empty stomach. You might make you feel nauseous. Again, everything is low and slow. And the best is if you can get these electrolytes and minerals from plants. Very often that is the absolute best source. So we can supplement minerals and electrolytes as we are recovering from chronic disease, not just potassium, but potassium, because it's so involved with our nerves and our muscles, then it might be a really big one. So I'm sharing this with you so that you can explore this. You can maybe supplement if you can get your blood work done. You can change your diet. And even just with the diet, a lot of people have shared that their spasticity is a lot less. Pain is less. They're sleeping better through the night. Their urgency, getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom is decreased tremendously. They have so many symptom improvements by cutting down the carbs. And then again, this is to help manage your symptoms of spasticity, and you're going to need to do more if you're dealing with a lot of constipation, but it might help the constipation, it might help the fatigue a bit and help the spasticity. So it helps your body to work better. But if you want your health and your life back, you actually have to treat the parasites. Really important, because that is where you get the highest quality of life and of health, where you can do so many different things, all the things you used to love to do. So really quickly, if you guys have any questions, you go ahead and type them in the question box. I'll go to them in a few minutes. But I'm just going to touch on the Live Disease-Free plan. Number one, reduce the carbs significantly down to, we find the sweet spot is between 30 to 40 total grams of carbs per day. Number two, support the body, get the bowels moving, make sure you're sleeping. Those are the two big ones, but there are others. Looking at your physiology and your blood work, supporting it, decreasing mold and radiation, wireless radiation from your environment. And we have a checklist. You go through all of that. So then before you start treating, you're feeling a lot better, right? So by decreasing the food, there's going to be less acids produced. By increasing your nutrition, your body's going to have more minerals, and you might have to supplement. You're going to notice a lot of symptom improvements at that point. And then we're ready to start treating. And of course, we're having daily bowel movements, so we're not going to be, having these parasites decompose inside of us. They carry a lot of metals, heavy metals. They also carry their own parasites, so we want them out. Then we are ready to start treating, and we work from big to small. We start with the bigger parasites, treating the larger worms, and then we take a break, and then we treat the fungi, and then take a break, and then we take a break week, I should say. So we do about 14 days treating the larger worms and protozoa. Then we treat the fungi for 10 days. We keep the fungus medicine separate from the other parasite medication, just because they interact negatively with a lot of meds. All right, but that's something you can talk to with your practitioner. And then the last part is we take a break week. And during the break week, we don't take the pressure off the parasites, but we're using more just herbs and the oxygen type therapies to continue to treat. And so then as we're doing that, you'll notice that you don't get the muscle spasms anymore. We don't have the acidosis. We don't have the low pH where our body is grabbing the minerals and trying to buffer all that acid. Then the minerals and the electrolytes can be used for our normal physiology, the normal functioning of our body. So this is really, really huge. And I think that it will help people a lot. So if you have muscle spasms and you're just getting ready to treat, maybe calcium and magnesium won't be enough. Maybe this is where you need to try a really well-rounded electrolyte mineral supplement. and get your blood work done, and just make sure that you're optimizing especially potassium, not just calcium and magnesium. And then we, as I mentioned, we do salt our food. Be just generous with your salt. It's good for you, and there's trace minerals in the Celtic and Himalayan sea salt. All right, I'm going to go to your question. So treating usually requires several treatment cycles. We have to consider that these parasites produce a lot of eggs. They hide under biofilms. So some of them can lay, 100,000 eggs in a day. So we need to hit them, take a break, let the eggs hatch, hit them again, do that over several cycles until you're symptom free, and then maybe do one or two more just to make sure that you really decrease them. So we're not sterilizing the body of parasites. We are reducing the population so that we don't have any symptoms and we feel amazing. We have high energy. But then we want to treat the parasites at least once a year. For some of us, it might be better to do it 2 or 3 times a year. I keep hearing from people that live in countries like Mexico. They're like, oh yeah, we treat every, 3 months or so. And in North America, in the developed countries, we don't have parasites. We don't treat parasites. How interesting is that? It's just so incredibly bizarre. And what's so interesting is they're like, well, there's a lot more multiple sclerosis in the developed countries than in Africa and Mexico but in those countries, they're treating parasites, and we're not treating parasites here. And then I shared with you last week about how when we have parasitic worms, it makes us more susceptible to other parasites like Babesia or malaria or Borrelia, the other Lyme infections. And so if we just focus on treating Lyme, for example, or even just treating Babesia, but we don't decrease the burden of the bigger worms, we never clear those smaller parasites. So that's what's so important. And so that's why go to our website when you're done, pick and choose topics. You will learn so much. You'll be going, oh my gosh, that makes sense. Oh my gosh, that makes sense. And this is the answer. This is the direction that you need to go to treat the cause that gives you the greatest quality of life. So I'm going to go to your questions right now. How many of you guys have those symptoms of spasticity? Have you had any heart rhythm issues, tremors, paralysis of muscles, fatigue, constipation, tingling, numbness, muscle twitches? When you get the little twitches in your muscles where it just moves, it's not always just the direct symptom of parasites, but it can be an indirect symptom of parasites where they're making you deficient. And sure, we could be deficient from our diet, but usually when we're living in developed countries, we usually are getting a fair bit of nutrition if we don't have parasites. Awesome. I'm so glad that you found me too. So diagnosed with parasites, and wow, potassium kept dropping and had Babesia and Lyme as well. That's interesting. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So you just saw your dog had a tapeworm. That's really common. And so Dr. Alan McDonald found tapeworm larvae in the central nervous system of MS patients in every subject that he tested. But also in 2 of them, he found developing tapeworm in them, which is really scary. So is Ezekiel bread bad? No, Ezekiel bread is great. But when you have a lot of parasites, then you're not, just as I shared, you're not going to digest if let's say you're deficient in potassium, that affects how you break down your carbs. And so you won't be breaking down your carbs very well. Also, when you have a lot of inflammation in the gut from these parasites, we don't digest our carbohydrates very well, and that becomes food for the parasite. So when we're recovering, we omit all the grains, grains. We're omitting all of them. So we're not even having things like quinoa or brown rice. So even the gluten-free, we're not having that because it really feeds the parasites, and we want them to be more quiet. The parasite drugs on their own are not a magic cure. They're helpful. But to recover from these incurable diseases, we decrease the carbs quite low. So if you had any grains, you're not going to be able to follow the diet because it's going to be too high in carb. So no bread and no pasta, no potatoes, all the veggies that stick to your ribs, the corn, etc., and peas, we avoid them until we have recovered. So over 2 months, you've been eating a big bag of pumpkin seeds and you don't notice any big parasites leaving. So I know that they say that pumpkin seeds are anti-parasitic, but we have not noticed that. And the problem is when you're eating a lot of pumpkin seeds, there's a ton of carbohydrates in that. So the carbs are going to feed the parasites. I honestly don't think that pumpkin seeds are effective enough to treat parasites. Hi, Lexa. How about treating or curing HIV? So I can't give any medical advice. Yeah. So what I have heard from students is that when they have, things like HIV or hepatitis, when you correct your microbiome well enough and you're living a clean life, like, lots of nutrition, you're active, but your microbiome is really healthy and you have a lot of health promoting microbes, then their viral symptoms they're basically like in remission. So that is what I would do. I would really optimize nutrition through our diet, low carb, treating parasites, bringing back the good microbes, keeping the carbs fairly low. And you're probably going to notice that you don't have symptoms. That's really, really common. All right. So Christopher, you mentioned you have terrible cramps that wake you up a few times at night every month. Very, very painful. Yes, it hurts like crazy. So I personally would not eat a whole bunch of pumpkin seeds. You're seeing already that it's not doing the trick for you. I personally would decrease the carbs. So if we're having any nuts and seeds, it's a very, very small handful once or twice a day of certain nuts and seeds. So that would be like almonds and pecans, not peanuts or pistachios. They tend to have more mold. The pumpkin seeds, again, you can have a small, maybe an eighth of a cup once a day. If you're improving, some students are so addicted to nuts that they just take it out of their diet so that they can recover. And then they start feeling a lot better. So, hi, Rose. Yes, you can't sign your name. We've had a lot of students that have been able to write again. One of our students years ago, she used to be a speed writer before MS, and then just in the program, she was able to start writing again, which is amazing. So I want you guys to report back to me and tell me if you start to introduce, trace minerals, electrolytes, but especially like calcium, magnesium, and potassium. If you start to supplement with that, let me know if it's helping your muscle spasms. I know, for example, on Amazon, there are a couple of leg cramp creams. There is Highland. And just if you go on Amazon and you type in leg cramp cream, you'll find some. Look at the reviews and just pick something that has very high reviews. So one of them is, I think it's Highland, possibly. But and look at the ingredients in them. And so they will have some of these trace minerals, electrolytes in them, but it might not be enough. You might have to supplement by taking a supplement. And I'm so sorry that you're going through that. Those spasms are brutal. It's like having a permanent Charlie horse or an extremely aggressive Charlie horse. And also arrhythmias, that's all linked with potassium, but probably other electrolyte imbalances also. So just be careful with meat. Like if you're only eating meat, if you eat large amounts of meat in one sitting, your body will convert that into glucose. So your blood sugar will go up, which will feed the parasites, which most people don't know. It doesn't make sense because it's not something like, how can meat turn into carbs? But it can. So that's why it's really important to, if you're following carnivore, that you are having more healthy fat, because the parasites don't really like fat very much. And just be careful with the fruit too. Papaya seeds, they're probably not going to be enough. So some of our students, we started with herbs and, black walnut, cloves, wormwood, herbs like that. You might pass some parasites. Those would be stronger than papaya seeds or pumpkin seeds. But again, our students would just still have multiple sclerosis. So it really takes the parasite drugs and also herbs, and we just avoid, like if we're going to have a nutter seed, it's like a tiny, tiny little bit just for calories, for interest, food, if we're improving. But if we're not improving, the students will take that out of their diet. But that won't be enough. So Carol, you're trying to diet again. You've been getting worse. You're feeling desperate, depressed, disappointed. You need guidance. Okay, I'm really sorry to hear that. You need to reach out to us. You need to connect with us. We can help you in this program. And just know that, we continue to learn. Like if you've watched my live events or even gone over the articles, our blog post articles, we've learned so much even in the last year, and we continue to learn. So for example, it's not enough just to treat the worms and to treat them effectively, but some of us have really high levels of a Babesia malaria type protist, or maybe even Borrelia. And if those are not treated, and there's others, right? There's Mycoplasma, there's other ones. So we have to also treat them, but they're easier to treat when you treat the big parasites first. And we have some students that beat multiple sclerosis like 8 to 9 years ago, and they're still MS free, which is so exciting. So Rose, I rub magnesium lotion on my calves and it helps with the cramps. Awesome. Consider the potassium too. See if that helps you too, and let me know. Lexa, you wanted to report back on the usefulness of thiamine HCl for reducing symptoms of hypertension. Oh, and that's another thing it causes low, like for example, sometimes, well, I should say some of our students have high blood pressure and some have low blood pressure. I always had really low blood pressure and some have higher. So you need magnesium with potassium too. Keto 1000 works well. Absolutely. Just make sure you don't have dairy products if you're doing keto. Avoid the butter is fine, but all other dairy products don't have it because that will feed the parasites. Yes. And so, for example, the parasites can cause high blood pressure. They can cause these global migraine headaches also. Last couple of questions here. So that's what we help people to do. It's just me. That's what we help people to do in the Live Disease-Free plan. So if you're at the place where you just found me and you don't know much about all of this, make sure to watch my masterclass training. Also go on our website, get all the guidelines for the diet, start implementing the diet, start feeling a lot better. And then once you're doing that, if you are looking for a practitioner to help you, but you're really struggling trying to find somebody that is knowledgeable in prescribing and guiding you through the process of treating parasites, that's what we help people to do in the Live Disease-Free plan. So what you can do is you can watch my masterclass training. And then if you feel that you would like support, you need support, you believe in this, you believe that this is what you're dealing with, then you can fill out a form. You can book a time with me to make sure that this is a good fit for you. Also, you'll get a link for the Coach-a-thon, which goes into great detail how we help people to recover from these parasites, the steps we use. And we're getting into the fall here. So this is like the last stretch before Christmas. You have to ask yourself, how do you want to end this year? What do you want 2025 to be for you? Do you want more of the same? Or are you at the place where you're like, I am done. Pam, I've been following you and I believe what you're saying, but there's something that just, I haven't taken action yet. Now is the time to take action, right? We're going into some pretty turbulent times in the world. You need your strength. You need your health, right? You're missing out on a lot of things. And so what's really important is that you get on track, you get the support you need, and then you treat these infections so that you can live your life. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. So for next week, I'll be back again with another really important topic. And I just wanted to share, actually, I don't know if I can pull it up fast enough, but I just spoke with this beautiful lady and how she, just by following the diet, I just was shocked at all the symptom improvements that she's had just from following the diet. So here, let me just quickly. So she's somebody who's had MS for, I think, 30 years, and she just found us. And so she's been following the diet, and she noticed, because and this is the thing, when we have multiple sclerosis, we don't just have multiple sclerosis, right? We have other conditions and diseases. And so let me see, she wrote a lot here. So she said, I've been doing a lot of things for a long time. Looking down here, I've done years. So she's been following the diet a lot stricter. She said, notice that my UTIs and my bladder problems with interstitial cystitis almost immediately started to go into remission with eating this way, the Live Disease-Free, like low carb. I realized this is not an overnight here. There's a lot to do, but I was frankly surprised at what a big difference it made immediately, how it can also, it helped the bottom of her feet, which I haven't in quite a long time. Again, she hasn't been able to talk to anybody about. So like the bottom of her feet also really helped. So we've had so many people reach out to us from the public, just the general public, that have implemented the diet, noticing that they're sleeping through the night a lot better, maybe getting up once or twice versus 5 or 6 times. Their spasticity can decrease tremendously. And if they're sleeping, then their mood is better, their brain fog is improving. So many different, pain can decrease, mobility can improve, strength can start improving just with the diet. Like some of our students right now in the program, like they're starting to do laundry again, and having the energy to do things that they haven't done in a long time. And for those of us that can do laundry, it's kind of like, oh, well, so what? But for those of us that can't take care of our home, we can't do our laundry, we can't shop, it is so incredibly exciting when we can do those things and care for our home and care for our family, which a lot of us love to do. So again, we're heading into the fall right now. We've had a beautiful summer. Where do you want 2025 to be for you? I want to ask you that honestly and let me know, where are you going to be in 2025? Are you going to still be struggling the same way? Are you going to be worse? Or are you going to be well on your way to recovering from multiple sclerosis and other chronic diseases? So the choice is yours. Watch my masterclass training. Reach out to me if you need support. And if you enjoy all of this research, all of this time that I dedicate to giving you information that really helps, will give you back your life, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It helps get the word out to everyone. So with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.